The Standard Deviations podcast is a weekly production that looks at money, mind, and meaning, all through a psychological lens. Each week, psychologist and New York Times bestselling author Dr. Daniel Crosby interviews a fascinating new guest, experts in everything from finance to literature to wellness.
When was the last time you splurged on something when you knew it probably conflicted with one of your financial goals, like paying down debt or saving for future fun in retirement? Well, if you do this, you're not alone. It's because of present bias, or to use the psychobabble term, hyperbolic discounting. As humans, we have a tendency to let the immediate rewards of the here and now win out over a desired future reality. To learn more, check out the Cash Stash Dash, a planning tool brought to you by the Guardian Network to see just how much your short-term spends might be impacting your longer-term financial goals. Play today by visiting www.livingconfidently.com/play.
Hello and welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Crosby, and I'm joined today by Samantha Russell, who is the newly crowned Chief Evangelist at 20 over 10 and FMG Suite. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we jump in, congratulations are in order. 20 over 10, a business of which you were a founding member, recently got acquired. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, so very exciting way to end the year. So, and actually, I guess by marriage, I'm one of the founding members, but my husband is truly one of the co-founders, and I was employee number one that was brought on. And so 20 over 10 has been around 4.5 years. We've been growing very, very quickly, especially in the independent RIA channel more than anywhere else. And we specifically have a platform that provides both websites, content, and then different marketing automation and distribution tools for financial advisors. And our company was acquired by FMG Suite, which is really made a name for itself as a market leader in providing marketing platforms, campaigns, specifically in the broker-dealer side of things. So it's a very exciting partnership, and there's so many different avenues that this may take and shape. And we're still very much in the discovery process of figuring out sort of what the product roadmap for new innovations will look like and kind of what we want to tackle next. But there is so much synergy. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, we're going to have some really awesome new modern tools that we'll be able to unveil for advisors in the coming years, which I'm very excited about.
Well, that is absolutely fantastic. It is no small thing to sell a business in any year, but especially in 2020, I'm sure it feels like a very big deal and quite an accomplishment. So hats off to you, your husband, and the rest of the team on an incredible accomplishment there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so we are going to talk a little bit about the psychology of marketing today. And when I sent over the questions, you were like, these are unlike any questions I've ever seen before. You may not have meant that as a compliment, but I took it as a compliment. And so, you're widely known in our space to be one of the most thoughtful marketers around. So I'm really excited to pick your brain a little bit today. So I don't know if you think this is fair or not, but, sales and maybe to a lesser extent marketing get a bit of a bad reputation for being coercive or sort of psychologically tricky. So we know that over the past 70 years, home sizes have tripled. Consumption has skyrocketed. And yet we know from similar studies on happiness over that time that we're no happier. So the marketers are winning, right? We're consuming more and more, and the psychologists like myself are losing. We're consuming more and more, but we're no happier than we ever were. Do marketers like yourself have an ethical obligation to use their powers for good, do you think?
Yeah, that's such a great question. There's so much to unpack there. And I think that, you have to, whatever job it is that you're doing, at the end of the day, be able to go home. And there's some people who really need to feel, in order to enjoy the job that they have and to rest their head at night and get a good night's sleep, to feel like they are acting in an ethical way and that they're making a difference and that they're not just selling another, widget. I think there's other people that don't have that luxury. They're just trying to feed their families. And, that's the way that the cookie crumbles for them. And so at the end of the day, I think there's so many opportunities as marketers for the products or the services that we're selling to make people's lives better. And, I think what ends up happening is if you're selling a great, beautiful linens, it might just be to some people another stuff, another item that people need, but you might be able to kind of tell yourself, well, I'm helping people get a better night's sleep, and sleep's really important. So, there's also the psychology of kind of how we convince ourselves of things. But I really am so interested in social marketing, and I don't mean social media marketing, but the kind of marketing that is becoming ever, increasingly more important, which is how do we get society to take actions that make society as a whole better. Some good examples of this would be, like in the 1990s, there was all sorts of campaigns to help increase condom usage in different parts of Africa where the AIDS epidemic was, rampant. And so now with COVID-19, there's so many opportunities for that today, for more social marketing here. But, I think we'll maybe get into that further. But yeah, I think what it comes down to is it's a personal decision for each person and what they can be comfortable with.
Well, you make really, I think, two brilliant points there. The first is, I think all of us, if we are to become truly satisfied and even good at our jobs, we have to become fluent in framing what we do in sort of a meaningful lens. Like you give a great example of the linens, right? I mean, some people might look at that as a very transactional thing, a very unimportant thing. But if you frame it in terms of, helping someone get a good night's sleep, it can be very powerful. I think with just about every job, there is, maybe short of being a teacher or working at a hospital or something, there is probably a cynical way to look at that job and say, hey, it's not really all that important. But I think with almost every job, there is simultaneously an elevated, more meaningful way to frame that job. And I think the people who are the very best in the world at their jobs become skilled at framing their work in a way that's meaningful and truly, truly believe it deep down. On the second piece, this social marketing, this is something we're right in the throes of right now with COVID-19. As we're talking today, the very first shots, the very first vaccines are going out. And yet we know that there are many, many groups throughout the country who are reticent to take the vaccine. And so marketers like yourself are being tasked with educational campaigns, influence campaigns around helping groups who might be shy or scared about taking the vaccine to get comfortable with it. And in some cases, these folks' reticence to take the vaccine is based upon historical injustices. Things like the Tuskegee syphilis study, where African Americans were tricked, were duped into thinking that they were taking part in something meaningful when really they were being infected by the government and, not told what was really going on. So the reticence is perhaps understandable, but it becomes the task of a social marketer to understand the principles of psychology and position that vaccine in a way that it can be, consumed for the greater good. So it's not all selling Happy Meals and McMansions, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, and the example that you just brought up, I heard a fantastic story on NPR a couple of months ago when they were prepping for, the vaccine rollout and looking at the numbers. The National Institutes of Health were looking at the numbers of public sentiment of how many people were saying, yeah, I'll take the vaccine when it comes. And they were so low. And thankfully, those numbers have continued to increase week after week. But one of the things that there was some grassroots organizations that were doing where were going into local communities, finding people like pastors or people, that were part of city council, people who were just well known in the community as, a community member that cares and that has great connections, and having them hold, little focus groups or backyard barbecues in a socially distant way. This was back when it was a little warmer, and inviting people to come and ask questions and talk about the science behind the vaccine and then even some of these people who were part of the trials were talking about their own experience, any side effects they had. And so I really think that, having it, there's two parts to, in my opinion, what is going to make a great marketing campaign for all that we need to get done in order to eradicate COVID, which is you need a top-down approach. You need to have leadership that's all on the same page and that is got a very, cohesive message that's going to be consistent. But then you also need on a grassroots level, different community members to step up who are well-respected and well-regarded and speak out and really carry the torch at the community level. One thing I think that has been a real big missed opportunity when it comes to like social media or, bigger kind of think of an advertising campaign for this is so many young people have just, I don't want to say not cared, but they're kind of like, okay, well, if I get sick, it doesn't matter. Like it's not going to affect me. And science is on their side in that sentiment. But the idea of them giving it to an elderly person or someone who's immunocompromised and what the repercussions of that have largely gone unnoticed by these people. The people that are sick and are dying, they're dying alone in hospitals, not in the public sphere. And so having some sort of campaign where you have a lot of young people and they're putting on their mask and on their mask is like the name of their grandma. Like I'm masking up for Barbara, 85, or I'm masking up for Roger, 92. That could be such a powerful campaign. And you could have young people uploading their own picture of them wearing their mask. I wear a mask for hashtag. There's so many great ideas of what we could do to get people excited and about caring for each other, but we need it to happen from the top down.
Yeah, that's a brilliant insight. I mask up for Nana, right? I mask up for grandma or grandpa. Helping people understand, the psychological term for that is salience, taking it out of the realm of abstraction and stating very plainly why you're doing something. Now, you've already, I think, begun to do this, but whenever I encounter a new topic, and I'm, of course, not a marketer by training, whenever I encounter a new topic, I like to study it and try and break it down to its constituent parts to understand sort of the pillars of success. So when you look at fabulous marketing campaigns, when you look at just one or two of your favorite marketing campaigns of all time, what would you identify as sort of the pillars of success that cut across good marketing campaigns?
Yeah. So the first thing is taking something that people know in their hearts to be true or have an inkling that this is how something is and expressing it in a way where everybody goes, yeah, that's it. That really helps with that salience. So let me give it, and I'll kind of go through all these examples with using something that will help us understand it. So one of my favorites is Apple's Think Different campaign, right? So for those that may not remember or have forgotten, back when Apple was really, coming back and fighting against IBM for market share, and Steve Jobs was at the helm, and he's just coming back. They're launching things like the iPod for the first time. They had this campaign where they said "Think Different," and it was a series of black and white photos of famous people like Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, and they were black and white photos. But then at the bottom, it would say "Think Different," and you had the Apple logo there, the one that they used to have with like the rainbow of colors. So that logo really stood out against those black and white photos. And they didn't say anything about their product. They didn't say anything about the tech that they had. They were just highlighting these innovative thinkers. And then they had this phrase, "Think Different." And that's how they started it, right? So if you think from a marketing perspective, we all understand who these famous people are. And we understand that they had a way of approaching the world that was different, that was completely paradigm shifting, and what they created changed our world as we know it. And so Apple was aligning themselves with that. And then the other really important thing they did was they wrote the copy or the slogan with just two words, "Think Different," right? If you can distill your tagline or what you do or your value proposition down, I always advise people 10 words or less. But really, the best ones usually are 4 words or less. L'Oreal, "Because you're worth it." Nike, "Just do it." The shorter, the better. That's also in any marketing campaign going to help people remember it, because we have so many messages that are thrown at us every day. We can't possibly, think of these long-winded campaigns. So again, you want to attach yourself to something people know to be true. They have some understanding of the concept you're talking about, but then put a spin on it. And then you also want to keep the copy as short and sweet as possible. But whatever visuals that you choose when it comes to marketing need to be chosen very, very deliberately. We process things visually so much faster than we do when we're reading words. And so you don't want to be long-winded. You want to use visuals and copy together. Those are sort of like at a high level, no matter what kind of marketing you're doing, 3 things to start out and keep in mind.
Those are brilliant. There's a video of Steve Jobs talking about the Think Different campaign that I use in some of my presentations. And he says, I'm going to loosely quote him here. He says, we're not going to compete on speeds and feeds or MIPS and megahertz. He's saying basically our competition is trying to say, look, our RAM is this much more robust than Apple's RAM, or, our speed is this much faster. And he's like, that's not what anyone cares about, right? They care about this sort of aura, right? This aura of thinking different, not whether this product has, this much more memory or this is this much faster than the other thing. They want it to work, right? I mean, there's a degree to which Apple has become successful because their product is simple and intuitive to use and it just works. But when you're marketing it, I think you've really nailed it. And this is a behavioral economic principle too. I think very often we think when we're trying to change behavior that the way that we're going to do that is just by laying out the rational steps from A to Z. But people don't buy things rationally. They buy on emotion, and we need to connect with that fundamental truth in a way that's pithy and memorable, I think, just as you've outlined here.
Yeah. And, going back to that, I think it's something I talk with my husband about our children all the time. People really have different camps and beliefs about should you reward children for doing what they're just supposed to do. And I really believe that, yes, you need to be motivated intrinsically to do things, but that the intrinsic comes after you get some of the extrinsic over time. You start to build it up and associate it yourself. So for instance, my son, who's 5, he has 2 responsibilities in our home that he has to do every day, which is unload the dishwasher and make his bed. And yeah, in a perfect world, it would be great to think that he's just going to feel so proud of himself. I don't ever have to say anything. I don't have to make a big stink about it. He's just going to do it because he's going to feel good with the accomplishment. But I believe that I need to praise him and I need to give him give him a pat on the back and publicly say at the dinner table, Hudson's been doing great every day this week. I didn't need to remind him. And that the more I do that, the more that he'll start to build up that intrinsic reward. And I think with this whole wearing a mask and washing your hands, we expected everyone just to do the right thing. And we sort of know that human beings don't just do the right thing for no reason all the time. So you need to give them that extrinsic reward, which is where I think sort of calling people out and having that eye mask up for kind of a campaign would go such a long way, because you could then kind of get that pat on the back in terms of likes or people, your post going viral because so many people have seen it. And so I really try to think about that too when I think about any kind of marketing campaign. Like, how do we give somebody some sort of reward for partaking or participating in some way with whatever it is we're trying to do?
Is there a good tangible example of this, of someone being rewarded for taking part in a marketing campaign that you can think of? Yeah, so
with our audience, it's financial advisors. And, for years and years and years, financial advisors have been told, you shouldn't worry about your marketing. You can't worry about your marketing for compliance reasons. You should just focus on your customers and outsource all your marketing. And what happened is there's all these advisors who didn't really think much about their marketing. And for a lot of them, again, they couldn't because of different compliance restrictions. But that has really changed. And 2020 has really, set rocket fuel to this whole trend of you need to care about what you look like on social media and how you're emailing people and all these other things. But yet getting people to change their behavior, to spend time every week posting to social media or curating or personalizing campaigns. We can help them create their content, but we still want them to be involved in choosing which pieces are going to be specific for their audience, or maybe editing a subject line so they get more opens and it's more personalized. What we can do is things like send them a quick report saying, congratulations, in the 2 emails that you took time to edit the subject line, those 2 newsletters got the highest open rate of all the emails that you've sent in the last 8 weeks, significantly higher than X, Y, and Z. Or, congratulations, the blog post that you inserted a video of yourself, a quick 2-minute video of yourself talking about this subject, it's, your number 1 most read blog post over the last 6 months. So that kind of reward, giving them the pat on the back, we have found goes a really long way.
Well, I think it's a reward, and it's also just a sign of efficacy. I think, in my work and your work, we sort of work with the mind, and we're both of us working to shape human behavior. And it can be kind of ephemeral. It can be kind of hard to get your arms around whether or not it's working. So in addition to being rewarding, I think you're showing like, look, my hard work is paying off, which is, its own form of reward. So you touched on this briefly, you talked about social media, and one of sort of the mantras of modern life and modern marketing approaches is that everyone is a brand. So first, let me ask you, do you think that's true?
Oh gosh, this question. I think, okay, let me put it to you this way. If I have, unfortunately, my mom's mom is no longer with us, but when she was alive, she had a very spunky personality, and she had certain things we would always joke. We'd be like, that's on brand for grandma, because she had just this way about her and the way she did things. So yes, she had a certain way about her that if she had a social media account, people would know what to expect from her. But she wasn't out there digitally in the world having her own billboard where she was sharing her thoughts with the rest of the world. So I think once you get online and you start sharing your experiences online, that's when you really can become a brand. But for people who are not on social media, they're not engaging with people as much in the digital world, which is really going the way of the wind. I mean, it's really an age thing. No, that's not the case. But for young people who pretty much have been born into this world where you have all these accounts from the time, you're a teenager, yes, I think everyone does have their own brand.
So let me see if I can express 2 seemingly conflicting ideas at the same time. So I got to be honest, this bums me out a little bit. Like this idea that everyone is a brand is a little bit like womp womp to me, because it makes me feel like we all get kind of productized or commercialized. But then we also know simultaneously, I mean, I think that it's true. I believe what you're saying. I've seen it in my own life. So how do we embrace the reality that everyone is a brand without corporatizing or selling out in such a way that, it's a little worrisome to me that like me or my kids would move through the world going, how is this going to impact my brand? Like, I want a little more authenticity than that. So how do we balance the reality that, yes, everyone is a brand without becoming soulless, I guess?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. I think there's been this divergence where people are becoming more like brands, but brands are becoming more like people. And that we are finding that the brands that are rewarded the most with, especially on platforms like social media that are incredibly public, are the ones that start talking to other people in a more conversational tone, and they get rid of the corporate speak, and they choose somebody, whether it's an actual person or a mascot, to be the face of the brand, and they empower people who are running their social media to take risks and to talk more like a human than a robot who has to worry that, corporate isn't going to like what it is that they tweeted. So there's definitely, becoming more of an acceptance of being more authentic. And I think that's spilled over to brands. But when it comes to like individual people, I think for those of us we have businesses, we think about it more. I have some relatives though, who they don't own their own business. one of my cousins is a stay-at-home mom with her kids, but again, I would say it's very on brand for her to like always post things about recipes she's made that were budget friendly and like feed a family. And she's always got a positive, like upbeat attitude. And she's posting crafts to do with your kids to pass time in quarantine. And then one day she posted something that was sort of like having a bad day. And she was just being really authentic. And like, she said something about how she was having a rough time. And all of these comments exploded where people were like, are you okay? This is not like you. So I think that's just a perfect example of, you know, even if you don't have a business, even if you don't have something to sell, your brand is just more, what is your overall personality? What is it about you that people would recognize as being on point for you? You know, there's certain characteristics that people associate with you, and people expect you to sort of stay in that lane with that behavior.
Yeah, it's, I think brand is really all about consistency. This is why people franchise businesses, because there's an expectation of consistency. And if I pull off the road in Minnesota or Georgia or Wyoming or Utah or Florida, I think I'm going to get more or less the same thing from, the Chick-fil-A or the McDonald's or, wherever I go to. So it's a good thing to consider when we're thinking about our own brand is just, it's what people expect from us. And so being careful to put forward something where there's enough wiggle room for you to be yourself, right? No one is unequivocally positive. No one's all negative. So making sure you're putting forward a face that is who you really want to be perceived as, and not sort of over managing that, I guess.
Yeah. And I think this is just actually a lot of people talk about niche. Is it important to have a niche if you are in the service, if you provide some sort of service, such as financial advisors or a lawyer, niche down, and everybody tells you that. And that a big part of that is consistency. You can then, when you email people or you have social media or you have your website or you go and give talks, people know what to expect for following you or for showing up, that you're going to be consistent in the types of education and information that you share with them. And that becomes incredibly important. And so when you veer off of that path tremendously, it can be, if you're inconsistent all the time about what you post or what you talk about, it's harder for people to wrap their minds around why it's worth their time to be in your sphere of influence, right? They want to know, okay, I follow Daniel because I'm going to get behavioral, psychology tips. And I follow Samantha because I'm going to know how to grow my social media following. But if all of a sudden I start being inconsistent in what I post and trying to be all things to all people, people don't understand what they're going to get out of engaging with me. And so they would be a lot less likely to be a part of that community.
Yeah, it's interesting because all of us sort of contain multitudes, right? Like all of us are multidimensional and we have all these interests and things. But I notice on my own Twitter feed, say, when I post something that is out of the, relatively narrow realms of finance or psychology, it falls kind of flat because that's just not why people follow me. And, learning to accept that and understand it, I think, is part of it. So I want to talk with you for a minute about this idea of people becoming more like brands and brands trying to humanize themselves, because we've seen a lot of that this year. This year we've had brands seizing on topical news and trying to integrate that into their marketing strategy. Facebook ran ads talking about how they would keep us connected during the pandemic. Healthcare companies ran ads honoring doctors. Grocery stores ran ads celebrating frontline workers. What do you think of this practice, and how do you walk the line between being topical and being gross, right? Like being topical and taking advantage of a bad situation?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, all of the examples that you gave, I think if I was in charge of the marketing at those companies, I'd sign off on them. I think those all make sense. For me, it's sort of hard because I can't, give everyone my gut, but I have like a gut feeling about things. Like, are we taking advantage of a situation? And if we are, then we don't do it. And that's just like a gut feeling that you have. So for instance, when everybody I guess this was in June, I don't know if you remember, it was like a very popular thing to put like a black square on your Instagram in support of Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of different thought leaders came out and said, actually, that was bad because it was cluttering up valuable information. It was cluttering up people's feeds where they needed to get valuable information about the movement or resources. And it wasn't a good thing. And, we never posted the black square to our platform. And not because we didn't want to be in solidarity, but we just felt like we could do something that made more sense for what we can be a voice for. So instead, we rounded up examples, really great examples of firms in financial services that had done a great job with inclusivity in their marketing campaigns. And we said, these are great examples that the rest of you, anyone else who's looking for inspiration of how to do it, could go and seek out as a great way to give you inspiration, to inspire you to, make new choices or revamp your own campaign, just to see how to do it well. So we rounded up, 10 different examples and shared them in a really, really long form piece of content. We created a video about it. To us, that was more authentic to what we do and what we do as a company. And so, again, it's hard for me. I don't have like a checklist, like, should we do this or not? But I think it just comes down to, you don't ever want to seem like you're taking advantage of a situation. You want to add to the conversation because it's already in the sphere of what you do, and you can add value, not take advantage. And so all those examples that you gave, I think, make sense. People also just have negative views sometimes of platforms like Facebook. It doesn't matter what they do. If they put an ad out, they're going to say, well, Facebook's the devil and we hate this. And that's a larger issue of your brand and needing to do some work around how people view your brand in general that no ad is going to fix overnight.
I think one of the things you make some great points there. One of the things that I have observed of this practice is that if you go there, and I think it's fine to go there, I think all the examples I gave are legit enough examples. But if you go there, be prepared to be measured by that same metric. There was a grocery store early on in the pandemic who was putting out all these feel-good commercials about honoring the men and women who were working on the front lines at the grocery stores to keep us all fed and stocked up at a time when we were short on everything, right? And so they put out these sort of heartwarming ads about this while simultaneously engaging in a lot of employee unfriendly practices about cutting overtime and not helping with safety precautions and things like this. So out of one side of their mouth, they're praising their frontline employees, and out of the other side of their mouth, they're, cutting the very things that made their work possible. I think you see that a lot with ESG. Certain financial services firms have, developed ETFs and mutual funds that invest in companies that have, say, equal female representation on a corporate board when they themselves don't have, equal female representation on their corporate board. So if you're going to go there, be prepared to go there all the way and walk the walk.
And I think that's to me, that's a no-brainer, but you're right. There's a lot of people, and I think a lot of times what happens is the people creating the marketing campaigns don't have the access they need, or they're not going and asking those questions beforehand, or maybe they're making assumptions. And so I think for the longest time, because marketing can be hard to measure, it can really be hard to measure. It's not like sales. You do a call, did you win the business or not? It's all about sentiment and changing opinions and creating this brand over time, that it's not often given the same sort of access to the top and asking those questions, or saying like, look, if we're going to be out there telling people this, we need to practice what we preach. But I really believe that some of that is starting to change, and people are starting to see marketing as a much more integral part of what is prioritized at the top. And, I say this over and over again, people are no longer sold to the way the world used to be. Now we go online, we look for information, and depending on who gives us the information that we think is the best information and that we can trust, that's who we then engage to do business with or buy from. And so, sometimes you can be spending a lot of money cultivating a brand for a long time before it starts to pay off. So it's really, the people who are going to win are going to be having this long view approach, which is really hard to do, in certain situations when, you also have to hit certain goals in that month.
Yeah. So I want to keep with this theme of sort of openness and transparency with brands and their marketing. I think it's safe to say that political fervor has seldom been higher in the U.S. than it has been this year. That continues, even 6-7 weeks after the election. And so you've seen sort of coinciding with this, you've seen certain brands take a strong stance in favor of a candidate or a party. The My Pillow guy has sort of famously become a Trump surrogate. Goya Beans came out in favor of Trump earlier this year. Expensify's CEO sent out a letter to their 10 million person email list saying that people needed to vote for Joe Biden. So what do you think of brands and even individual, say, financial advisors taking a vocal and particular political stance?
Yeah, the Expensify one. Yeah, I was actually pretty shocked by that because you do not see that happen very often. And for good reason, which is just that our country is so politicized that if you do that, be prepared that you might lose 50% of the population that can buy your services, depending on what it is you sell. So, if I were advising a company like Zappos, where anyone in the country can, buy our shoes, would I tell them to do that? If they're asking me from a sense of, is this going to be good for long-term profits, then the answer would probably be no, in the sense that there's a lot of people that might not read your whole message. They'll just hear, we think you should vote for Biden, or we think you should vote for Trump. And if half of the population does not agree with you, then they may no longer buy your shoes. For a financial advisor or somebody that's more of a small business owner, I don't think it's as risky in the sense that you can usually only serve so many clients anyways, and you build personal relationships with these people. And you often get into certain conversations where you want to be able to agree on certain topics. I still think in a lot of cases, it's okay to not say anything about who you're voting for and keep that private. But if you feel very passionate about it and you only want to work with people who are, agreeing with you, or you feel like it's your duty to say it, especially again, if you're a smaller business owner, as long as you can be respectful about still understanding the other person's point of view, which has really gotten, I think, hard to do in this climate. I don't think there's anything wrong with being honest and saying, this is who I'm going to vote for. Just understand the repercussions that may come with it. You may lose clients you already have, or other people may take offense to it and not want to do business with you. And if you're okay with that, I think that's fine. It just, again, for me, it's all about how do you do it in a way that you're not putting down or belittling someone else because of what you believe.
Yeah. Understand the trade-offs, because there certainly are some.
Okay. Exactly.
So, Samantha, you've been incredible. You've shared a wealth of insight with us. We are going to close out now with a sort of lightning round, free association round. I'll throw a phrase or a word out to you. You just tell me, in the spirit of authenticity, the first thing that comes to your head, okay?
Oh gosh. Okay.
Hey, we gotta walk the walk, right? Okay, so the best tagline of all time.
Just do it, Nike.
Agreed. High five. If given just one platform to market on, which would you choose? Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn?
I would choose LinkedIn because that's where most financial advisors that we work with hang out. But so that answer is specific for my business. That wouldn't be the answer I'd give to everybody else.
Right. So understand that it's going to be business specific. There's no one right answer.
Right.
Okay. If you could hire just one celebrity to market your brand, who would you choose?
Oh, man. God, the first person that comes to mind is Christy Teigen, because she's just so authentic and amazing, but I don't know if she'd be a right fit for financial advisors. So, but that's, I'm going to go with it. I like Christy Teigen. We're going to go with her.
Okay. So at least for your personal brand, Christy Teigen, maybe for financial advisors. I like it. So we tend to think of Coke, Nike, and Apple as sort of the go-to marketing wizards, but what's a less discussed brand with serious marketing chops?
Oh, one of my favorites right now, I think everyone should follow what they're doing, is called Fast. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're trying to help companies all of the companies out there that are competing with Amazon compete with Amazon. So one of the reasons Amazon has such a leg up right now is because of the one-click checkout and the 2-day shipping, right? We all don't want to have to enter in our credit card every single time we check out. So that's the first thing that they're tackling is the quick checkout. So they call it the world's fastest checkout. And any company can add fast to their checkout, and you basically have the Amazon experience for your customers. And their head of social media, Matthew Kobach, used to do social media for the New York Stock Exchange. And he is just a master of getting people to talk about what they're doing online. So you should definitely check them out.
And are they the ones with the hoodies?
The hoodies and the rocket ship. Yep.
Yeah, those hoodies are so sought after. Way to go. Well done for a small brand to get that kind of that kind of raving fans, people talking about their swag to that extent. That's fantastic. Yes. So Samantha, you've been incredible. If people want to get in touch with you or learn more about what you do, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, as I mentioned, Samantha C. Russell, and Twitter at Samantha20, all spelled out Twenty. And then we have an amazing blog.20over10.com, where every single day we share a new long form piece to help you market better. And then we also have a YouTube channel, just 20 over 10, where we help with both long form content like webinars, as well as quick little videos every single week.
All right. You heard her, a ton of great content. Go check it out. Thank you again for being such a fantastic guest.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
All opinions expressed by Dr. Daniel Crosby and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of or endorsement by the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, and its affiliates, subsidiaries, employees, and agents, including Park Avenue Securities and the Guardian Network. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for legal, tax, and investment decisions. The opinions are based upon information participants consider reliable, and Dr. Crosby and Guardian are not responsible for the consequences of any decisions or actions taken because of the information provided. Guardian copyright is a registered trademark of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America. All materials are subject to United States copyright laws. Copyright 2020 Guardian.